Welcome to Franchise Focus. I'm Laura Blackmore, your host, and a franchise consultant with over a decade experience in franchising. Franchising isn't one size fits all, and this podcast helps focus on what truly matters. Each week, we pull back the curtain with top industry experts, whether you're exploring your first franchise or expanding your portfolio. Let's dive in. Welcome to Franchise Focus Podcast. I'm Laura Blackmore, your host, and today we are speaking with Doug Smith, Senior VP of Franchise Development for Belfor Franchise Group. Belfor is the largest commercial restoration company in the world, and the Belfor Franchise Group is comprised of 14 brands targeting both residential and commercial clients, from restoration, indoor air quality, plumbing, junk removal, and so much more. Welcome, Doug. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you, Laura. Nice to see you again. Thanks for having me on this lovely afternoon.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit more about, your background and how you got started with Belfor Franchise Group and franchising in general?
Sure. Boy, this is going to go way back here, so try not to date myself. My first go around with franchising was actually right when I got out of college. And now we're talking, 35,
Really?
A long time ago, 30 some years ago. I worked, my first job was, I was in the restaurant business, and the first few companies I worked for were franchise organizations. So I worked for a company in upstate New York, and they owned a bunch of Perkins family restaurants and Chili's and a couple. So I was on the other side of things, right? I was on the franchisee side of things and worked up, into the management roles there within that company. So got to see kind of what a franchisee was like and how they interacted with a franchisor and things of that nature. So did that for several years, and then eventually got out of the restaurant business and got into sales in general and did a couple of different sales roles in a couple of different fields, financial services and a couple of other things. And ultimately, though, came back to a company called Harris Research, which was the parent company of ChemDry and Enhance, ChemDry carpet and upholstery cleaning, Enhance wood refinishing. So did that for several years, running the franchise development team, a great group of folks. And then we were acquired by Belfor back in 2019. So we had a couple of brands ourselves at the time. Belfor Franchise Group only consisted of 3 brands, which was 1-800 Water Damage, Ducts, and Hoods, our duct cleaning franchise and our commercial hood cleaning franchise. So together in 2019, we combined and became 5 brands. And then fast forward all the way to 2025, we have 14 brands and counting right now, all in the home services fields.
Yep. Fantastic. And can you talk a little bit more about, just the strategy, the approach to Belfor and what fits into that brand and what kind of makes you unique and how that's leveraged across franchisees?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple different prongs I want to kind of explore there, right? So how is Belfor Franchise Group, different than every other, large franchisor? There's a lot of consolidation in the industry, right? There are several big players that now own, 10, 15, 25, right? Different types of brands, especially in the home services field. One way we probably differ, and this is not a knock on private equity, I think that certainly, and we've been owned by private equity in my past lives and so forth, but that comes with one set of rules, essentially, when you're owned by them, and a certain set of metrics. We're owned by Belfor Property Restoration, which you referred to as we kicked on here, the world's largest property restoration company. So we're owned by an operating company. So the day in, day out, right, is a company that is comprised of probably what looks like a couple hundred small businesses. So a large part of Belfor, the parent company, a large part of their growth is acquisition of other property restoration companies. So we have 150, 160 offices throughout the U.S. with Belfor, but each kind of operates like its own almost franchise, right? These are corporate locations, but they almost act like a franchise with their own general managers, their own regional managers, et cetera. And so they almost act like individual property restoration companies that pull together for large catastrophic events. But day in and day out, they look a lot like a franchise, right? They're managing their own individual P&Ls, they're reporting up through a hierarchy of management, et cetera. So we go through Belfor itself, every day lives that kind of small business mentality. Even though we're nearly a $3 billion company, it kind of operates like a bunch of small businesses, which I think translates very well to understanding what a franchisee goes through day in and day out. Secondly, we've grown, like I said, from, 3 to 5 to 14 brands and counting. Most of those brands, it's a combination of things. We've acquired some. We've started several from scratch, but the brands that we do start, we all keep in mind the synergies that can come from acquiring or starting a certain brand. For example, we acquired Redbox Plus dumpsters a couple of years back. The impetus for that initially was Belfor Property Restoration spends tens of millions of dollars on dumpsters in any given year, right? And when you look around, you're like, wow, if we had a way to, kind of keep some of that in the family, that'd be great, right? So we ended up, buying Red Box Plus dumpsters. We've got, over 80 franchisees with nearly 300 locations across the country can pick up referral business from Belfort when that's needed, right? So they work in conjunction with our Belfort offices when the time's right to help them out and offer their services, right? That's a win-win for everybody, right? That's something Belfort uses an incredible amount of dumpsters. If we've got franchisees in the area that can help, that's great, right? So it's not always guaranteed business. We still want our franchisees to treat Belfort just like they would any other customer, right? Take care of them from a customer service and a responsiveness standpoint. But the opportunity to get that referral business and get the introductions and meet the general managers, et cetera, are all kind of there in place. A lot of that goes with a lot of our brands. We had 1-800 Water Damage Restoration Company, and we started Blue Kangaroo Packouts, Contents Restoration, as kind of offshoot of that, right? As you're doing both Belfort and our franchise 1-800 Water Damage, you come into an event, a fire, a flood, wind, whatever the damage is, and you've got to get in there and start mitigating that scene. One of the first things you have to do, right, is get the contents out of the house. Well, there are some restoration companies that do that, some that do it well. Most like to outsource that. So I thought, wow, if we had a franchise that specialized in the niche of contents restoration, wouldn't that be a great fit? So that was kind of born out of that line of thinking. So a lot of our brands really are born out of how could this brand seamlessly kind of fit in with our other brands, and help the whole family grow.
Gotcha. And something that I think you guys do that's unique is help with on the financial side for franchisees coming in or potential people. Most franchisors can't afford to that. You're so large, but you do. Can you talk a little bit about that financing help and even maybe?
Yeah. So like most franchisors, right, we have outside relationships with different lender SBA programs and, rollover opportunities. Right? We have all the standard stuff that we can work with them on, but we do typically on all of our franchise brands, we do help finance the initial license fees internally. So pretty much across the board, we do that. And then on certain brands, we actually will help with like equipment and startup packages, things of that nature. If the candidate meets certain requirements, we'll work with them on that as well. So, and in some of those cases, again, if it's not done internally, if it's done externally, again, we have 14 brands with literally thousands of franchisees. So the scale helps with lenders, working with us, working with our candidates, working on approvals. They know our business. They've done lots of loans and loan programs with the various brands. So they understand it and they know, and that kind of helps smooth the process as they go through. But yeah, we do everything with a combination of both internal and external financing, and it makes things go smoother and quicker in most cases.
Great. And in terms of looking for new brands, there's some obvious areas that seem like it would fit in, but you're overall still kind of focusing on the whole where you're currently doing business and how that can spread out to other areas, touching other areas, or
yeah, we have no desire to branch off from the home services space.
Right.
And some of our brands are more B2C, right? To consumer kind of friendly. Some of our brands tend to lend themselves more to B2B in a lot of cases. And some are just a combination. But we like the home services space. We're not going to start cookie shops or cake shops or burger shops or anything like that. Lord knows, I'm a patron of all those franchises and I love those. It's just not our wheelhouse. So we plan on staying in the services space and looking for additional brands that, again, have those same kind of synergies that to roll in with our current portfolio. If anything, we've got to pull our CEO back sometimes. I think he kind of goes out and he sees lots of great ideas, but we also want to do it in a what makes sense for us and to roll it out and not put too many on all at one time so that we can efficiently manage that process.
Gotcha. Are there a lot of shared resources in terms of vendor relationships and whatnot that can work across multiple franchises that your franchisees are experiencing maybe better cost of sales or cost of goods?
Yeah, another benefit of being a large franchisor with lots of brands, right? One of the great examples is when we have, annual conventions. We'll combine brands, to have our annual conventions, and we'll have an exhibit hall, right? Like any other trade show. And in there might be 40, 50 different, vendors and suppliers. Okay. Right. And they work across a lot, right? Whether that could be, a uniform provider or a payroll provider or insurance provider, right? A lot of those things are kind of ubiquitous across all the brands, right? They have a need for certain things. So a lot of those deals, it's not one of our brands going out and trying to negotiate, well, we got 25 franchisees and we need a few uniforms type of thing, right? It's, oh, no, we have over 1,000 franchisees, right? And we have all these different needs. So scale helps, right? With anything, scale helps in the negotiation and getting preferred pricing, things of that nature. So that makes a big difference, I think, as well. Both, and then of course we have people internally that are managing those relationships. So when things come up or go wrong, because there are always going to be issues, right? We have people in place that are set to manage through those processes and help the franchisees.
Is there a general profile that works across most of these brands? Or in most of your brands, your owners are in it full time, right? They're building that foundation and managing the process. Or what's that?
Yeah, we do like to have our owners in it full time, if at all possible. That's not to say there aren't exceptions, and it's not to say that people don't grow out of that role.
Okay,
As
right.
a matter of fact, a lot of our brands have a kind of get off the van or get off the truck type of
Mm-hmm.
goals that we put in place for them at some point in time. We really do like people in the business. We don't like to do absentee ownership. There can be exemptions for kind of semi-absentee with the right structure in place, but we do really want people involved in the business, having that skin in the game, getting to manage it day to day. That does make a huge difference in the success of the franchisee. But that's not to say, right? We've got systems as new as a year old. We have systems this year that are 48 years old, our oldest one. So, and everywhere in between. So obviously, the more mature a system gets, if you start out with one truck, one van, one vehicle, right, and you're growing it, and maybe you have one or two territories, and right as time goes on, you're adding territories. You're starting with more vans. You're adding staff. Eventually, you need to be off that truck, quote unquote, right, and you need to be working, on the business and not in the business. To, if I can use the cliche everybody likes to use, but at some point you're dealing with more employees, more vehicles, larger deals, estimates, things where you're going to need to be often managing, working on sales for your technicians. So we do prefer they start in the business. I think it just gives them a well-rounded foundation that they need, right, to know everything there's to know about the business, learn it. Of course, we have business coaches and marketing coaches and all the things in place to help the franchisees, but it's their business, right? So they've got to be able to learn, to grow, develop, to increase sales and what have you. So we do want them working kind of on the business at some point in time.
The marketing channels you use, are they fairly consistent across the brands, or do each brand have to do something a little different, whether it's more focused on commercial or residential?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So both, right? So it depends. I mean, there at some level there are consistencies, right? We do digital marketing for all of our brands, for example. So social media, digital marketing, SEO work, all those types of channels, right? That you just need to participate in, right? And updated websites, those types of things. So we work with all those, but then the channels can diverge a little bit depending on, like you said, if it's a B2C, if it's a B2B, that can be approached a little bit differently, right? Is it just insurance and program work, or is it just kind of retail work? So there are some differences in marketing. Again, consult. Our coaches, our trainers, our onboarding team. What's nice is when you have 200-300 employees just within the franchise group to help support all these brands, whether that brand is 2 days old, 2 years old, or 2 decades old, you're still getting a large staff, right, at Belfor Franchise Group to help support that brand. Even though we may start a brand from scratch, nothing is really starting from scratch. You're getting a marketing department, right, that's already together and working on 13 other brands.
Right.
You're getting trainers that have come through our, been educated with the rest within our training department, right? You're getting our onboarding team that works with several brands as far as all the requirements, leading up to your training and your launch, getting all those things done. So you're working with teams that do this every day, year in and year out. So you're getting a lot of that experience, that we spread across all the brands. So a lot of times when we're starting a new brand, it's exciting. You have the opportunity to be one of the first in the pool, right? That's a little bit scary. It's a little bit risky, but we help de-risk that, I think, with the fact that you've got 13 other sister brands here, right, that are going through the same things. They have the same staff, et cetera. So I hope that makes our candidates feel a little bit more at ease on the support they're going to get, even if it is a newer franchise brand.
Right. And talk a little bit about your training facility, because that's state of the art.
New expanded facility. Of course, Belfor Franchise Group is based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
We just opened a new sales. I call it the sales building because that's what we do in sales, right? We take ownership of everything. But That's a 35,000 square foot building, of which 20 some thousand square feet are our showroom, right? So when a candidate comes an example for a discovery day, or what we call meet the team day, they're going to come in, they're going to walk in, they're going to see every single brand we have has a van, a truck, whatever they use in that showroom. It's all state of the art. It's got all kinds of techie things and video screens and things like that. And that's kind of, yes, it's flashy, but it is our sales center, right? When you come in, that helps tell the story, right? You might be coming for a Junko Plus franchise, one of our latest franchises, right? Not a lot of units, and maybe you're worried about that, right? Well, I get it's Belfor Franchise Group, but it's new. There's not a lot of people I can talk to yet because it's a new concept. But then you walk in there and you see, wow, look at this. I see every brand that you have. I see the vans. I see the initial equipment packages I'm going to buy. So when I walk up to that van, I see everything I'm going to receive. When I write you that check, right, I see all that stuff. I can now put it together in my head, and I see the scope and the scale, right? I see they do all this, right? I think then they go in and they meet the marketing people, they meet the trainers, they meet the onboarding, they meet the brand presidents, right? But they've now built a picture in their head and put this puzzle together of, I see what I'm getting from a support standpoint, from a scale standpoint. So I think that's a big, we like to show it off, but I think it really tell the story and fill in the gaps. And that's nothing to say of our training facility. We had an old sales building, HQ, if you will. That's been turned into a state-of-the-art training facility. So that's where most of our brands come and that's all been updated, and that looks phenomenal. And that's where most of the brands do their actual training when they come for their in-person training. We have one of a few, I don't know, there's maybe a dozen or 14 actual certified flood houses in the United States, one of which is right there at our training center.
Yeah.
I think as of this week, we've flooded that house 62 or 63 times. So that's where our 1-800-Water Damage does a lot of their training. It's where we'll go out and work with insurance companies to bring their staff in and their adjusters in to help them train. So it's used quite a bit. And as we've added these brands, part of, again, those brands being related and kind of, more pieces of that puzzle, that used to be used strictly for 1-800-Water Damage. Now we use it for Blue Kangaroo packouts. It's a fully stocked house. So now once we flood it, we can actually have our Blue Kangaroo team go in and empty the house out and pack it out and load it up, and almost like training a moving company, right? How do you take care of stuff? How do you load it on the truck? You take it away, you dry it, restore it. Things like that. We've used it for our Patch Boys brand, punching holes in the walls or doing flood cuts, where we'll put 6 or 8 inches of water into that house, and that sheetrock might need to be dried. In some cases, we'll have them cut it out and replace it. So it's been a great tool to help train several of the brands. And again, that's because the brands are so kind of interrelated.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Any overarching theme to your cultural fit? The candidates that just are really the kind of ideal fit for an Belfort group. I mean, certainly people that want that structure, want that support, that need to be comfortable is helpful. That's often who when I'm talking to candidates, and I can sense that they need to see a big team behind them. You guys play very well for that, and the support is there, and they're very happy with that process. But any other qualities of candidates that you're looking for that they, truly know that this is going to be the right culture for me?
Yeah, I think one thing, I mean, this will sound cliche as well, but they've got to be doers still. Sometimes I think a lot of people who are not familiar with the franchise space misunderstand what a franchise is, right? They don't understand they are a small business owner. They are now an entrepreneur. They own that business, lock, stock, and barrel, right? And I think sometimes they don't understand that and maybe think a lot of things are done for them. We are certainly there for development of marketing and to have all the players we've talked about, from vendors and suppliers and scale and things of that nature, right? At the end of the day, though, you still got to you have to get up on Monday morning and put 2 feet on the floor and get out there and run your business, sales and marketing. And when I say, we look for those skills in our candidates, I don't mean to say that they have to come with specific, sales and marketing roles that they've done in the past. But, sales and marketing are a big part of all of our brands, right? You've got to get the phone to ring first and foremost. You've got to get leads. You have to generate business. We're there to support you and provide the tools, but you have to use those tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
Home Depot doesn't come out and build the house for you. They'll sell you the plywood and the 2x4s and the cinder blocks and the hammers, but you need to go build the house, right? It's franchising. We'll give you all the tools and support and training, but at the end of the day, They don't run your business. You run your business, right? So we need people that are doers, right, and understand that. I mean, of course, we're you, me, the rest of the world is franchising. Talk to people about that. But sometimes if they haven't experienced it, I think there's a little misunderstanding of what they're getting into. So we're looking for doers. We're looking. I say sales and marketing. Can people just talk to people, right? Can they be comfortable in someone else's home when they're talking to them, right? So, because those are the things you need to do. And a lot of our brands are either restoration type brands directly or in support of the restoration industry, right?
Right.
So we always tell our incoming franchisees, you need to be the best. You're at your best when your customers are potentially at their worst. You're walking into homes that have just been burned, flooded, tornadoes, hurricanes, whatever it is, right? I mean, maybe it's just burst pipes, deep freezes, whatever that is. In a lot of cases, right, they are not having a good day. So you need to be able to share, and show empathy, right? When you walk in, not that you're just there to have them write a check, right? You need to show that you're there and you actually care about them and their property and what's going on in their lives. So a general sense of empathy and a comfortableness, sitting on somebody's couch in their living room and going over, the job with them. So sales and marketing, yes, but I also mean it in that kind of soft skills kind of way.
Right, right. So, and that's the or the side. Even though like 1-800 water damage, you're providing a lot of those services to homeowners, but then you've got to be able to develop on the B2B side, right, for your referral partners, and talk a little bit about that and how they.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously a lot of the brands, as we talked about, are both commercial and residential, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a B2C and B2B. So a lot of property restoration, just as much commercial, as there is residential, in some cases even more. So again, you've got to be able to go out and have those conversations, and you're also, when it comes to restoration brands, you might be talking to not just the homeowner or the business owner, but talking to the TPAs, the third party administrators, talking to the adjusters, talking to the insurance companies, right? So there could be a kind of a multi-pronged approach to some of the more restoration heavy brands, because it's not always the homeowner that's scheduling the job and paying for the job. And in most cases, it's not, right? Or the business. So another example is our Red Box Plus dumpster business. While we certainly service the residential community, more of that business tends to be commercial. So you're working with builders, landscapers, roofers, restoration companies, right? You're working with all these type of people that require dumpsters. So you've got to get out again in the community and start developing those relationships. It's not just always about making the phone ring. It's about boots on the ground, right? And going out, especially when it comes to commercial. You need to go out and meet the people where they're at. So again, with those sales and marketing skills, that's kind of where that comes in.
And the Belfort name, I'm sure, carries a lot of weight to help open those doors, but you still have to form that local relationship, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Belfort can do a lot for you with the name and the brand and the recognition, but I'll be real with you. We might have a brand like the dumpster brand that's going out and trying to work with one of our restoration competitors. So not in all cases, they may not even want to work with you potentially, because they're like, oh, wait, you're a Belfort company?
True.
I can actually compete against Belfort. So you've got to kind of, explain your story, right? That you're a small business, independent small business, that's just part of the system. And this is what you can do for them and so forth. More often than not, it's a good thing. But I'm not going to tell you it's, never a challenge you need to overcome. But potentially it could be. But
interesting. Yep.
For the most part, it's a plus. It's a plus because, again, they understand the backing. So they understand that you're not just going to be here today, gone tomorrow, right? So they understand the backing and the depth and so forth. So in most cases, that is definitely the reputation within the industry. And I think Belfort, with regards to property restoration, has one of the best in the reputations in the industry. So, and they do a ton of commercial work, a lot of large, working with municipalities and universities and schools and hospitals and manufacturing plants and a lot of really, really big jobs like that. So I think it helps tell that story of scale and resources that can be spread across a lot of the brands.
Is there ever a situation where a candidate's coming in and they're thinking they want this one, but as you're talking to them, you think they'd be better fit for a different brand? And does that work? Has that worked?
Yeah, I smile because it works two ways. They may be in a conversation with us and we may think to ourselves, boy, they came in for X brand, but they certainly talk like Y brand, right?
Yeah.
But we've also had it where they've come to our facility that we talked about earlier for one brand, and they walk the showroom and they think, wow, tell me more about that, and what is that over there? So we've actually had it happen where they've pivoted, come in for one brand and actually left wanting a different one because they saw, again, they're seeing all the toys and the bells and the whistles. So that's doesn't happen all the time, because if you've gotten them that far, right, they've learned about the brand you brought them in for. But I'm not going to say it's never happened. It has happened a handful of times. So.
And when they want to expand, do most typically stay within the same brand, or do you have franchisees that have added brands, sister brands?
Both. So we do have people obviously that expand the brand that they're in, but we certainly have multi-brand owners within the system. Some of the brands lend themselves, to be closer to what they do, like a 1-800-water damage and a Blue Kangaroo pack.
Right.
That's a common kind of combo, if you will, because you're really your own lead generation, right? You get a call for a water damage job, for instance, right? And the 1-800 franchise comes out. Okay, well, Mr. Homeowner, the first thing we need to do is, assess the job. Okay, we're going to need to get, clear out the whole first floor, right? So then we can call our partner, our Blue Kangaroo pack house. They'll come out and they'll remove all your belongings. They'll restore anything that needs to be restored. They'll keep it on site and store it for you until such time the job is done. They'll come back out, put everything that's been restored back into your home for you. So it's actually like literally their own lead referral type of when they own both of those. So that's kind of interesting, and that works across several pairings of our brands, if you will. So we have Ducks, our HVAC and ductwork cleaning franchise, and a lot of these. I think if there's a fire event, or even with water, if there's mold and things like that, you've really got to get your ductwork cleaned out, whether that's commercial or residential, right? So that's another great combination if you're doing things like that you could bring in your Ducks franchise to service the HVAC and vent work, after a restoration job. So there's a lot of those synergies where they kind of fit together.
Which brand, if you know, has like the largest franchisee? What if you really want to scale huge?
The largest actual individual franchisee?
Yeah.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I would say across, of course, that's a lot, but our largest franchisee is probably in our hoods, a commercial kitchen ductwork cleaning franchise. Yep. Yeah, they did about $10 million this year, which, for a home service company is pretty substantial. So we've got some pretty big 1-800-water damage franchisees. We've got across all the brands. We have a lot of multi-million dollar operators, but I could be off base, but I'm pretty sure that Hood's franchisee is probably the biggest if I looked across all the franchisees.
Okay, interesting. Not sure I would have thought of that. So,
well, that's an interesting concept because the nice thing about that is it's a legally required service, right? Depending on your municipality, it's typically quarterly or monthly requirement to have your kitchen hoods cleaned. So it's not, and there aren't a lot of large national players out there. So, as Mike Rowe says, right, it's kind of a dirty job.
Yep.
But, dirty jobs, boring jobs. I'm sure anybody that spends any time on social media, that is certainly a couple of buzzwords that's talked about an awful lot, right? Those boring jobs, those dirty jobs, those kind of roll up your sleeve type of jobs. And that's one of them. And it's required by law that, every restaurant, every university, every hospital, every school, anybody with a commercial kitchen has to have that done, has to have that serviced. So we're fortunate enough to have a brand that's national in scope. National accounts team does really great with that type of business. So so that's a great opportunity.
National accounts, that's a good point. So do you guys help with some of those in terms of the franchisees?
We do. We have an entire national accounts division where their sole job is to go out and work deals and contracts with national players that then get farmed out to our franchisees. Probably about half the brands are engaged in that program today because half of our brands are relatively new. You do have to get up to a certain scale and have enough coverage across the country, right, in order for that program to work. So as the brands mature and get enough locations, then they come into our national accounts program.
Any new brands that you're targeting pretty soon, or?
Wink, wink, wink. We've got one that's in development right now that we're kind of beta testing. So, kind of in the, home improvement handyman type of kind of space, if you will, with a little bit different twist. But, we're kind of toying with that right now. Like I said, it's in a little testing phase. And then I know Sheldon, our CEO, he is always on the hunt for what's the next best fit for
Right.
Belfor and Belfor Franchise Group. So, but we've got some newer brands that we're still also in the early stages. Our Cool Bins, climate controlled portable storage, is still relatively young and in its infancy. So we're getting that, up and going. Like I mentioned earlier, our junk hauling franchise, Junko Plus, relatively new, kind of getting that going. We are launching a new pest control company here, call it in the next month-ish sometime. So that'll be another new startup for us, Clear Pest Pros.
Okay.
That's something that'll just be getting off the ground with us. So yeah, there's still a lot in the works and a lot in the pipeline as well.
Right. No, that's excellent. Anything more you want to talk about in terms of the synergies or, leverage the Belfort Group can provide or?
Well, like I said, scale and reputation are a big part of, joining Belfor Franchise Group, right? You get support kind of built in, and not just specific to us, but in times of uncertainty, and anybody who's probably sat there and watched the stock market over the last couple of days, I would say uncertainty is one way to describe it. So,
I guess so.
There's lots of interesting things going on right now, right, in the economy and on the global stage. I think that paired with, this thing right here, right? You and I are in that kind of entrepreneur space, specifically the franchise space. And because of that, most of my feeds are just full of franchise information and or business and entrepreneurial people kind of speaking, right? So I think the younger generation coming up, especially, millennials and Gen Zs, I think if you read all the kind of industry standards, right, they are much more prone to be entrepreneurs than baby boomers or even, Gen X's like myself. So I think this space really feeds into those demographics. And when there's times of uncertainty, I think that reinforces it, right? People are like, oh, they kind of freak out about the corporate channel or layoffs or, the economy. And I think it almost sounds counterintuitive. Well, if things aren't rough, do they really want to spend money on starting a business? I think it's actually viewed the opposite way. At least I feel like in times of economic stress or uncertainty, I feel like more people come to franchising to start a business just so they feel like they can control their own destiny, not somebody else, right? So I feel like, regardless of kind of what happens out there, I feel like this is a good time to invest and in general, and that whether that's with us or somebody else, so be it. We obviously love our candidates to come in and join the Belfor Franchise Group, but I think just people getting into entrepreneurship and starting their own businesses is really, really critical. So regardless of who they do it with, I just love the push to get people out there and working for themselves.
Absolutely. No, I think you're right. And you can control your destiny. If you feel comfortable betting on yourself, you've got to be willing to bet on yourself. But yeah, and if not, then maybe, the corporate path is your way.
I mean, betting on yourself with a large support group behind you makes
Great
a
point.
big difference. And again, I go all the way back to, not everybody understands franchising if they haven't been there before. Want them to understand that, you still get to be an entrepreneur. You still get to be, be your own businesswoman. But, you've got all this support behind you, designing all your logos and your van wraps and your marketing materials. And, if you do commercials, whatever that is, right? You get all that at your disposal without having to start from scratch, right?
Right. It's jump starting you. It's saving you so much time. And you've got that big support team that, however you're paying, you would be paying for that if you were trying to do it on your own. So in one way or another. Yeah. No.
Absolutely.
Oh, this has been great.
I say just engage with us.
I like that. No, absolutely. You guys have got a bunch of great brands. Love working with the Belfort Group. And I really appreciate your time today, Doug.
Laura, it's always a pleasure. And it's a great way to kind of start wrapping up this Friday afternoon.
That's right. All right. You take care.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap for this episode of Franchise Focus. I hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. If you're thinking about franchise ownership or want to learn more about the brands we discuss, connect with me on LinkedIn or visit my website at blackmorefranchiseconsulting.com or just leave a comment. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share it with someone. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on Franchise Focus.